Admiral Marcus Chen stood at the window of his small diplomatic ship, watching the stars drift by in the endless black of space. At 70 years old, his face showed the lines of a man who had seen too much war and too little peace. His gray hair was cut short in military fashion, and his blue eyes held the steady calm of someone who had faced death many times before. "Admiral, we're getting strange readings on the long-range sensors," called out Lieutenant Sarah Martinez from her station. Her voice carried a note of worry that made Chen turn from the window. "What kind of readings, Lieutenant?" Chen walked over to her station, his boots clicking softly on the metal floor of the small bridge. "Multiple ships, sir. Big ones. They're coming in fast from 3 directions." Martinez's fingers danced across her controls, trying to get a clearer picture. "I count at least 20 vessels, maybe more." Chen felt his stomach tighten. His ship, the Peaceful Dawn, was built for talking, not fighting. It carried no heavy weapons and only basic shields. They had come to this part of space to meet with representatives from the outer colonies, not to fight a battle. "Can you identify them?" Chen asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Yes, sir. They're Zephyrian ships, Dominion fleet markers." Martinez looked up at him with fear in her young eyes. "Admiral, we can't outrun them. They're too fast and too many." The Zephyrians were trouble. Chen had read the reports about this proud alien race that had been taking over worlds across the galaxy. They were tall, scaled creatures who thought they were better than everyone else. They had never attacked human space before, but Chen had always known this day would come. "Send a message to Earth Command," Chen ordered. "Tell them we've encountered a Dominion fleet in Sector 7. Use emergency protocols." "Yes, sir." Martinez began typing rapidly. On the main screen, the alien ships appeared as bright dots growing larger by the second. Chen could make out their strange shapes now, long and curved like giant metal snakes with weapons bristling from every surface. Each one was 10 times the size of his small ship. "Admiral, they're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Put them on screen." The face that appeared made several of the crew members gasp. The Zephyrian was massive, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow with inner fire. When it spoke, its voice was deep and full of menace. "Human vessel, you are trespassing in Dominion space. You will surrender immediately, or be destroyed." Chen stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Colonial Fleet. We are on a diplomatic mission. We have every right to be in this sector under galactic law." The alien laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Human law means nothing here, old man. The Dominion has claimed these worlds. Surrender now, and we may allow your crew to live." Around the bridge, Chen's officers looked to him for orders. He could see the fear in their faces, but also trust. They believed he would find a way out of this situation. Chen wished he shared their confidence. "We are a diplomatic vessel," Chen said calmly. "Attacking us would be an act of war against humanity." "War?" The Zephyrian's laugh grew louder. "What war could your pathetic species wage against the mighty Dominion? We have conquered 50 worlds. We have fleets that darken the stars. What do humans have? A few colonies and ships held together with prayers." More alien faces appeared on the screen as other Zephyrian commanders joined the call. They were all laughing now, their scaled faces twisted with cruel amusement. "Look at him," one of them hissed. "An old human thinks he can threaten us. Their entire species is weak and soft." "I have seen their colonies," another added. "They grow food instead of building weapons. They write poetry instead of training warriors. They are no threat to anyone." Chen listened to their mockery without changing expression. Inside, he was thinking furiously. The Peaceful Dawn had no chance of fighting or running, but maybe he could buy time for his crew. "What do you want?" he asked. The first Zephyrian, who seemed to be their leader, smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "We want you to come aboard our flagship. You will be our guest while we decide what to do with humanity." "And my crew?" "They will remain on your ship, for now." The alien's meaning was clear. "Do what we say, or everyone dies." Chen nodded slowly. "I'll come aboard. but I want your word that my crew will not be harmed. You're hardly in a position to make demands, human. But yes, your crew will live if you cooperate." 20 minutes later, Chen found himself in a Zephyrian shuttle heading toward their massive flagship. Through the small window, he watched his ship growing smaller behind him. His crew was still alive, but for how long? The Zephyrian flagship was enormous. Chen had seen big ships before, but nothing like this. It stretched for miles in every direction, covered with weapons and armor. As the shuttle flew toward the docking bay, Chen counted at least 100 gun positions. This was a ship built for war and conquest. The docking bay was huge enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Peaceful Dawn. Hundreds of Zephyrian soldiers lined the walls, their weapons pointed at the shuttle. As Chen stepped out, he was immediately surrounded by guards. The soldiers were even more impressive up close. Each one stood over 8 feet tall, their scaled skin gleaming under the bright lights. They moved with the smooth grace of natural predators, and their eyes never stopped watching for danger. "This way, human," growled one of the guards. They marched Chen through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with pictures of Zephyrian victories, burning cities, surrendering armies, conquered worlds. The message was clear. This is what happens to those who oppose the Dominion. Finally, they reached a massive chamber filled with Zephyrian officers. At the center sat the largest alien Chen had ever seen. His scales were darker than the others, and scars covered his massive arms. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire room. "So, this is the human admiral," the giant said, looking down at Chen like a man might look at an insect. "You are smaller than I expected." "I am High Commander Vextar," the alien continued. "I speak for the Dominion in this sector. And you, little human, are my prisoner." The other Zephyrians in the room began to laugh and hiss with amusement. Chen stood straight and quiet, his old soldier's training keeping him calm. "Tell me, human," Vexatar said, leaning forward in his massive chair. "Does your species know how to beg? Because that is what you will do before this is over. You will beg us to spare your pathetic colonies. You will beg us to let your people live as our slaves instead of dying as free beings." Chen met the alien commander's yellow eyes without flinching. "I don't beg." This brought fresh laughter from the assembled Zephyrians. Vextar's scarred face split into a terrible grin. "We shall see, old man, we shall see." High Commander Vextar stood up from his chair, and Chen realized just how massive the alien truly was. At nearly 10 feet tall and covered in thick scales, Vextar looked like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. His yellow eyes glowed as he looked down at the old human admiral. "Bring the map," Vextar ordered. 2 smaller Zephyrians carried in a large device that projected a 3-dimensional image of local space. Chen recognized the star systems immediately. It showed human territory and the surrounding areas. Red markers indicated Zephyrian positions, and there were far more of them than Chen had expected. "Look carefully, human," Vextar said, pointing at the display with one clawed finger. "See how small your territory really is. 15 colonies spread across 12 systems. Pathetic." The hologram rotated slowly, showing Zephyrian fleets positioned around 3 human worlds: New Beijing, Harmony Station, and the agricultural world of Green Valley. Each fleet was massive, easily capable of destroying everything on those planets. "Your species has been living in a bubble," Vextar continued, walking around the display. "You thought you were safe because the other races left. You alone. But we are not like the others. We take what we want, and we want everything." Chen studied the tactical situation. The Zephyrian positions were smart. They had chosen targets that would cause maximum damage to human food production and industry. Green Valley alone fed 6 other colonies. If it fell, millions would starve. "What do you want?" Chen asked quietly. Vexatar's laugh rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "Want? We want it all, old man. Every human world, every human ship, every human life under Dominion control." Another Zephyrian officer stepped forward. This one was smaller than Vexatar but still towered over Chen. His scales were a lighter green, and his voice was sharp like broken glass. I am Sub-Commander Kresh, the alien said. I have studied your species for many cycles. You are weak creatures who avoid conflict. You make treaties instead of taking territory. You build hospitals instead of weapons factories. That's not weakness, Chen replied. That's civilization. The Zephyrians in the room burst into laughter at this. Kresh shook his head with obvious amusement. Civilization? You call it civilization to be defenseless? To trust others to respect your borders? The galaxy is not a safe place, human. The strong survive and the weak become slaves or corpses. Vextar moved closer to Chen, his massive form blocking out the light. Here are our terms, Admiral. Your species will surrender all territorial claims beyond your original 3 systems. You will pay tribute to the Dominion, food, raw materials, and workers. Your military will be disbanded, and Dominion governors will rule your worlds. And if we refuse? Chen asked, though he already knew the answer. The hologram changed, showing simulations of orbital bombardment. Cities burned, forests died, and oceans boiled away into steam. The Zephyrians had done this before, Chen realized. These were recordings of real attacks on real worlds. The planet Xerion had a population of 2 billion, Vextar said casually, pointing to one burning world. They thought their defense fleet could stop us. It took us 3 days to break their resistance. Most of the population died in the bombardment, but we kept enough alive to serve as an example. Chen forced himself to watch the terrible images. Millions of alien civilians running through burning streets. Children crying over the bodies of their parents. Entire cities reduced to radioactive ash. The Corvani tried to hide in underground bunkers, Kresh added helpfully. We used plasma drills to reach them. It took weeks, but we found them all. Now their world grows food for Dominion soldiers. This is what happens to species that resist us, Vextar said. But we can be merciful to those who submit willingly. Your people would live, though not as they do now. The hologram changed again, showing human colonies under Dominion rule. The cities looked different, darker, more militaristic. Humans worked in mines and factories while Zephyrian overseers watched them. It was slavery dressed up with prettier words. You have 48 hours to contact your government, Vexitar said. Tell them our terms. Tell them what happens if they refuse. And tell them that their famous Admiral Chen is our guest until they decide. Chen looked around the room at the assembled Zephyrians. There were dozens of them, all high-ranking officers if their decorations meant anything. They watched him with the lazy confidence of predators who had already won. Why are you telling me all this? Chen asked. Why show me your plans? Vextar's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Because you are going to help us convince your people to surrender. You will record a message telling them to accept our terms. Your voice will carry more weight than ours. I won't do it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Zephyrian officers stopped their quiet conversations and turned to stare at Chen. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed dangerously. What did you say? I said I won't do it, Chen repeated calmly. I won't help you conquer my people. Vextar moved faster than Chen would have thought possible for something so large. One massive clawed hand grabbed the front of Chen's uniform and lifted him off the ground. The alien's breath smelled like sulfur and rotting meat. You will do exactly as I command, little human. Or I will have your crew on that pathetic little ship killed one by one while you watch. Chen met the alien's gaze steadily. If you kill them, you'll learn nothing about human defenses. If you keep them alive, they might escape and warn Earth. Either way, threatening them won't make me cooperate. For a moment, Vextar looked genuinely surprised. Then his grip tightened, and Chen felt his ribs creak under the pressure. Perhaps. You need time to think about this, the High Commander growled. Guards, take him to detention level 5. Give him a cell with a good view of his ship. As the Zephyrian soldiers dragged him away, Chen heard Vextar addressing his officers. Begin positioning the fleet for the demonstration attack. If the humans won't listen to their admiral, perhaps they'll listen to the screams of a burning colony. The detention level was deep inside the massive ship, and Chen's cell was exactly what Vextar had promised. A small room with a window that showed the peaceful dawn floating helplessly nearby. His crew was still alive for now, but Chen knew that wouldn't last long if humanity refused the Dominion's demands. A Zephyrian guard brought him food, some kind of processed protein that tasted like cardboard. Chen ate it anyway, knowing he would need his strength for whatever came next. Hours passed. Chen sat on the hard bench that served as a bed and thought about his options. He could record the message Vextar wanted, but that would only delay the inevitable. The Zephyrians would conquer humanity either way, slowly through submission or quickly through war. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cell door opened. Vextar entered, followed by several guards and a recording device. "Have you reconsidered, Admiral?" the High Commander asked. Chen stood up slowly, his old joints protesting. He looked at the recording device, then at Vextar's expectant face, then back at the window where his ship waited. "I have," Chen said quietly. "Excellent. You will tell your people to—" "You want war?" Chen interrupted, his voice suddenly hard, as steel. "We will give you war." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Vextar began to laugh, a sound like boulders falling down a mountain. The other Zephyrians joined in, their hissing laughter filling the small cell. "War?" Vextar gasped between laughs. "You? An old man in a cell? Your entire species couldn't fight off a swarm of space flies." Chen said nothing. He just stood there, with his arms at his sides, watching the aliens laugh at him. But deep in his eyes, something cold and dangerous flickered like a distant star. Deep in the heart of Earth's primary military command center, Admiral Sarah Reeves stared at the message that had just arrived. The words were simple, but their meaning made her blood run cold. Admiral Chen had been captured, and the Zephyrian Dominion was demanding humanity's surrender. But it wasn't the main message that worried her most. Hidden in the communication data, encoded in a pattern that only a few people in the galaxy would recognize, was something else entirely. A single word that changed everything: Omega. "Get me General Harrison and Admiral Kim," Reeves ordered her aide. "Priority Alpha clearance, and activate the secure conference room." Sarah Reeves had served under Marcus Chen for 15 years before, taking command of Earth's Second Fleet. She was 45 years old, with short black hair and the lean build of someone who spent more time in zero gravity than on planets. Her dark eyes missed nothing, and right now they were focused on something her computer screen that most people couldn't even see. Within 10 minutes, she was sitting across from the two most senior military officers in human space. General Harrison commanded Earth's ground forces, while Admiral Kim controlled the First Fleet. Both looked confused about the emergency meeting. "Marcus has been captured," Sarah said without preamble. "The Zephyrians have him, and they're demanding we surrender our outer colonies." "Damn," Harrison muttered. The general was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a combat engineer. "How many ships do they have?" "That's not the important question," Sarah replied. She activated the room's holographic display and entered her personal command codes. "The important question is what Marcus managed to transmit before they took him." The display showed what looked like normal diplomatic communication logs. But Sarah entered another code, and hidden data began to appear between the lines of text. "Protocol, Omega," Admiral Kim read aloud. She was younger than the others, with blonde hair and blue eyes that had seen too many battles. "Sarah, that protocol was discontinued 20 years ago." "It was never discontinued," Sarah corrected. "It was buried, hidden so deep that most people forgot it existed. But Marcus remembered, and now he's activated it." General Harrison leaned forward in his chair. "Refresh my memory. What exactly is Protocol Omega?" Sarah touched another control, and the holographic display changed. It showed a map of human space, but not the version that appeared in public records or diplomatic databases. This map showed the real extent of human territory, including dozens of systems that officially didn't exist. After the first contact, wars 50 years ago, some people in the government decided that humanity needed insurance, Sarah explained. They created a shadow military, Ships, bases, and personnel that exist completely outside normal records. Ghost fleets, Kim whispered. I heard rumors, but I thought they were just stories. The stories were true. For 5 decades, we've been building a second military in secret. Hidden shipyards in dead systems, training bases on planets that don't appear on any map, fleets that officially don't exist. The holographic display zoomed in on a system that looked empty, except for a small star and some asteroids. But as Sarah entered more codes, the true picture appeared. The asteroids were actually massive space stations. The empty space was filled with ships, hundreds of them all powered down and waiting. This is just one facility, Sarah said. There are 17 others scattered across human space. Each one contains a full battle fleet and supporting infrastructure. General, Harrison stared at the display with amazement. How is this possible? How do you hide entire fleets? Very carefully, Sarah replied. Every ship in the Shadow Fleet is built in sections at different locations. The final assembly happens in deep space, far from any shipping lanes. Personnel are recruited from special forces units and sworn to absolute secrecy. Most of them spend their entire careers in systems that officially don't exist. Admiral Kim was studying the technical specifications that had appeared on the display. These ships, they're not like anything in our regular fleet. The weapons, the armor, the power systems, they're all more advanced. The Shadow Fleet gets the best of everything, Sarah confirmed. While our public military makes do with standard equipment, the ghost ships get experimental technology. Weapons that won't be available to regular forces for another decade. Defense systems that exist nowhere else in human space. She changed the display again, showing personnel records. Thousands of names appeared along with their current assignments and locations. These are the Shadow Fleet commanders and crews. Most of them have been training for this day their entire careers. They know their ships, they know their missions, and they know how to fight a war that the enemy thinks is impossible. General Harrison was beginning to understand. So when Marcus activated Protocol Omega, he told every hidden base, every ghost ship, and every Shadow Fleet commander that the time for hiding is over. Sarah finished. Right now, across human space, commanders are opening sealed orders that they've carried for years, without reading. Ships are powering up their main drives for the first time. Weapons that have never been fired are being loaded with live ammunition. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. A time when their species faced extinction and needed every possible advantage to survive. How long until the Shadow Fleets are operational? Kim asked. Sarah consulted her command display. The nearest facilities should be fully active within 12 hours. The farthest ones will need up to 36 hours. But even the closest Zephyrian fleet won't reach our colonies for at least 40 hours, so we have time. What about Marcus? Harrison asked. Do we leave him with the aliens? Marcus knew the risks when he activated Omega, Sarah replied. He's buying us time with his life just like any soldier in combat. Our job is to make sure his sacrifice means something. She stood up and walked to the large windows that looked out over Earth's orbital defense platforms. In the distance, she could see the regular fleet, cruisers and destroyers that everyone knew about, ships that appeared in news reports and diplomatic ceremonies. The Zephyrians think they know what humanity is capable of, she said without turning around. They've studied our public military records. They know about our 15 colonies and our small fleet. They think we're weak because that's what we've let them think. And now? Kim asked. Sarah turned back to her colleagues, and they could see something cold and deadly in her eyes. Now they're going to learn the difference between what humanity shows the galaxy and what humanity really is. The Shadow Fleets aren't just military units. They're a statement, a promise that if someone threatens our species with extinction, we'll show them what extinction really looks like. She activated her personal communicator and began sending coded messages to Shadow Fleet commanders across human space. Each message was short and used language that meant nothing to anyone without the proper clearance. The sleeping giant awakens, she transmitted to Shadow Base Alpha. Operation Lazarus is now active. The children come home, she sent to Ghost Fleet 7. Prometheus protocols are in effect. One by one, the responses began coming back. Confirmations from bases and fleets that most people didn't even know existed. Within hours, the largest military force in human history would be moving toward battle. But the Zephyrians wouldn't know about any of it. Their intelligence networks could only report on what they could see, and the Shadow Fleet had spent 50 years perfecting the art of being invisible. "There's something else," Sarah said, returning to her seat. "The Shadow Fleets aren't just about winning battles. They're about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Every species that's been watching humanity and waiting for us to show weakness." She activated the display one more time, showing the positions of various alien civilizations throughout local space. "The Corvani Republic has been testing our borders for years. The Stellar Consortium thinks we're too peaceful to be a real threat. Even our allies in the Galactic Federation assume we'll always need their protection." "And now?" Harrison asked. "Now they'll all learn that humanity doesn't show its true strength until someone forces us to." The Zephyrians wanted to see what happens when you threaten human extinction. They're about to find out. As if summoned by her words, another message appeared on Sarah's display. This one came from the deepest levels of the Shadow Fleet network, from a facility so secret that only 3 people in the government knew it existed. "Project Damocles is ready for deployment," the message read. "Awaiting final authorization." Sarah looked at her colleagues. They both understood what this meant. Project Damocles wasn't just another weapon. It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy. Something so terrible that it had never been tested at full power. "Not yet," she replied to the message. "Hold Damocles in reserve. Let's see what the DAO, conventional shadow fleets, can accomplish first." But even as she sent the message, Sarah knew that the Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They had poked the sleeping giant, and now the giant was waking up angry. High Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green world of New Kyoto grow larger on the main display. The human colony looked peaceful from orbit, with its neat cities and carefully managed farmland. It would make an excellent example of what happened to species that defied the Dominion. "Sub-Commander Kresh, begin the demonstration attack," Vextar ordered. "Target the capital city first. I want the other human colonies to see what resistance costs." "Yes, High Commander," Kresh replied, his clawed fingers dancing over his control station. "All ships are in position. Bombardment will commence in 60 seconds. Vextar smiled, showing his rows of sharp teeth. The humans had not responded to their ultimatum, which meant they would learn their lesson the hard way. After New Kyoto burned, the other colonies would be more reasonable. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface," reported the sensor officer. "It looks like they're powering up some kind of defense grid." Kresh laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Planetary shields against a full Dominion fleet. These humans are even more foolish than we thought." "Commence bombardment," Vextar ordered. The first wave of plasma bolts streaked down toward New Kyoto's capital city. They should have turned the downtown area into molten glass within seconds. Instead, they struck some kind of energy barrier and dissipated harmlessly. "What?" Vextar snarled. "How are they stopping our weapons?" "Unknown, sir," the sensor officer replied, his voice uncertain. "Their shield technology is far more advanced than our intelligence suggested. We're reading power levels that should be impossible for a colony this size." More energy signatures were appearing across the planet's surface. Not just shields, but weapon batteries, big ones. "Sir, we're detecting missile launches from multiple sites on the planet," the weapons officer reported. "Estimate by the Great Destroyer, sir. Over 500 missiles incoming." "Impossible," Kresh hissed. "The humans don't have that kind of firepower. Our intelligence reports showed minimal defenses." The missiles struck the Dominion fleet like a swarm of angry insects. But these weren't the simple chemical explosives that Zephyrian intelligence had expected. They were fusion warheads, each one carrying enough power to crack a moon. The first ship to die was the destroyer Blood of Zerion. A direct hit from 3 missiles turned its entire midsection into expanding plasma. The ship broke in half, its crew dead before they knew what had happened. "All ships evasive maneuvers," Vextar roared. "Return fire, destroy those weapon platforms." But the human defenses were dug deep into New Kyoto's crust, protected by layers of rock and metal that the Zephyrians had never suspected existed. The orbital bombardment that should have been a simple extermination was turning into a real battle. "Hi, Commander," the communications officer called out, his voice tight with fear. "We're receiving a transmission from the human colony. Put it on screen." The face that appeared was that of a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She wore the uniform of a colonial defense commander, and she looked completely unafraid. "I am Commander Lisa Park of the New Kyoto Defense Force," she said. "You have attacked a peaceful human colony without provocation. This is your only warning. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Vextar's laugh boomed across the bridge. "Consequences? You dare threaten me, human? I command 50 ships of the line. What can your pathetic colony do against the might of the Dominion?" Commander Park's expression didn't change. "You're about to find out." The transmission ended, and new contacts began appearing on the fleet's sensors. Ships were emerging from behind New Kyoto's 3 moons where they had been hidden in the sensor shadows. But these weren't the small patrol vessels that Zephyrian intelligence had reported. These were warships, real ones, with heavy armor and weapons that made Vextar's blood run cold. "Identify those vessels," he ordered. "Unknown design, sir," the sensor officer replied, "but they're big. Battleship class, maybe larger. I count 12. No, 15. Contacts are still appearing, sir." The human ships moved with a grace that surprised the Zephyrians. Instead of forming a traditional battle line, they split into small groups and began attacking from multiple angles. Their weapons were different too. Not the plasma cannons that most species used, but some kind of particle beams that cut through Dominion shields like they weren't even there. The cruiser Dominion's Pride took a direct hit from one of the human battleships and simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was a cloud of expanding debris. "How is this possible?" Kresh demanded. "The humans are a peaceful species. They don't build weapons like this." "Apparently they do," Vextar growled. "All ships, concentrate. Fire on the lead human vessel. Show them what Dominion firepower can accomplish." 20 Dominion ships focused their weapons on a single human battleship. The combined firepower should have vaporized it instantly. Instead, the human ship's shields absorbed the attack and kept coming. Its return fire crippled 2 Dominion destroyers and sent a third tumbling out of control. But the humans weren't finished. More ships were arriving, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. These were even larger than the first group, massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Dominion fleet. "Sir, we're detecting a new contact," the sensor officer reported, his voice barely a whisper. It's huge, sir. Larger than our flagship." On the main screen, a ship appeared that made even the Dominion's massive vessels look small. It was sleek and angular, covered with weapon ports and sensor arrays, and it was broadcasting a message on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Sarah Reeves of the Human First Shadow Fleet," a woman's voice said calmly. "You have attacked a human colony and threatened our people with extinction. This aggression will not be tolerated." Vextar felt something cold settle in his stomach. Shadow Fleet? What was a Shadow Fleet? "All Dominion vessels, you have 60 seconds to withdraw from this system," Admiral Reeves continued. "If you remain, you will be destroyed. This is your only warning." "Never!" Vextar roared into his communicator. "The Dominion does not retreat from inferior species. Attack! Destroy them all!" What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a massacre. The human ships moved and fought like nothing the Zephyrians had ever seen. They used tactics that seemed impossible, appearing and disappearing from sensors, striking from impossible angles, coordinating their attacks with a precision that spoke of years of training. The Dominion destroyer Storm of Conquest tried to ram one of the human ships in desperation. The human vessel simply sidestepped at the last second, then cut the Dominion ship in half with a weapon that looked like concentrated lightning. "Sir, we've lost 15 ships," the tactical officer reported. "The humans haven't lost a single vessel." Vextar stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. Everything Dominion intelligence had told him about humans was wrong. They weren't weak. They weren't peaceful. They were predators who had been hiding their true nature until someone forced them to reveal it. "Hi, Commander," Kresh said quietly. "Perhaps we should consider Admiral Reeves's offer to withdraw." "No." Vextar slammed his fist down on his command chair. "We are the Dominion. We do not flee from anyone." But even as he spoke, more human ships were arriving. The system was filling up with vessels that shouldn't have existed, crewed by people who had been training for this moment their entire lives. Admiral Reeves's ship moved closer to the Dominion flagship, its weapons trained on Vextar's bridge. Her voice came over the communication system again, calm and professional. "Hi, Commander Vextar. You have 30 seconds to order your remaining ships to surrender. If you refuse, I will demonstrate what happens when someone threatens humanity with extinction." Vextar looked around his bridge at his terrified officers. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by an enemy that had appeared from nowhere. The humans hadn't just been hiding their defenses. They had been hiding an entire military that was more advanced and more deadly than anything the Dominion had ever faced. "You want war?" he remembered the old human admiral saying. "We will give you war." Now Vextar understood what those words really meant. The humans hadn't been boasting or making empty threats. They had been making a promise, and now that promise was being kept. 3 weeks after the disaster at New Kyoto, High Commander Vextar stood in the ruins of his command center aboard his damaged flagship. Half his fleet was gone, and the remaining ships were in full retreat toward Dominion space. But the humans weren't content to simply drive them away. They were following, and they were angry. "Status report," Vextar demanded from his surviving officers. Sub-Commander Kresh, his scales dulled with exhaustion and fear, consulted his damaged displays. "We've lost contact with the 5th and 7th battle groups. The humans destroyed them both in the Kepler system 2 days ago. The 3rd battle group managed to escape, but they report heavy casualties. And our reinforcements?" "The 2nd Fleet under High Commander Thexel engaged the humans at Proxima Station," Kresh replied quietly. "They lasted 6 hours before being completely destroyed." High Commander Thexel's final transmission reported that the human ships fought like nothing he had ever seen. Vextar closed his yellow eyes in pain. Thexel had been one of the Dominion's finest commanders, a warrior who had conquered 12 worlds. If the humans could destroy him and his entire fleet, then everything the Dominion thought it knew about warfare was wrong. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced. "It's from the human fleet." "Put it on screen." The face that appeared made Vextar's blood run cold. It was Admiral Marcus Chen, the old human he had captured weeks ago. But Chen was no longer a prisoner. He stood on what was obviously a human bridge, wearing a clean uniform and looking perfectly calm. "Hello, Vextar," Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I told you what would happen if you wanted war. Now you're learning the price of threatening humanity with extinction." "Impossible," Vextar snarled. "You were my prisoner. How did you escape?" Chen's smile was cold as winter. "I didn't escape. I was rescued. 24 hours ago, human special forces boarded your detention facility and extracted me and my crew. The facility no longer exists, by the way. Neither do the 3 battle groups that were guarding it." Behind Chen, Vextar could see other human officers working at their stations. Their movements were precise and professional, and their equipment looked more advanced than anything in the Dominion fleet. "You're probably wondering how we found you," Chen continued. "The answer is simple. We've been tracking every Dominion ship in this sector since the moment you captured me. Our sensors are better than yours, our computers are faster, and our tactical analysis is more sophisticated than anything your species has developed." "This is impossible," Kresh whispered. "How could they hide technology like this?" "Our intelligence networks are the best in the galaxy." Chen seemed to hear him even though the transmission was one way. "Your intelligence networks see only what we allow them to see. For 50 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment. While you were conquering primitive worlds and fighting species armed with chemical rockets, we were building something you never imagined." The display changed, showing a tactical map of local space. Red markers indicated Dominion forces, while blue markers showed human positions. Vextar's heart sank as he realized the full scope of what he was seeing. The humans were everywhere. They had fleets positioned in systems that the Dominion had thought were empty. They had forces moving to intercept every Dominion retreat route, and at the center of it all, a massive concentration of ships was heading directly toward the Dominion home system. "We call it the Shadow Fleet," Chen explained. "Ships and personnel that exist completely outside normal records, while our public, military maintained peaceful relations with the galaxy. Our shadow forces prepared for the day when someone would threaten our species' survival." "How many ships?" Vextar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "More than you can imagine," Chen replied. "We've spent 5 decades building the most advanced military force in galactic history. Every ship is equipped with technology that won't be available to other species for another century. Every crew member has trained their entire career for this moment." The tactical display zoomed in on the Dominion home system, showing dozens of human ships moving into position around the planet Zephyria Prime. "Your homeworld is now under siege," Chen continued. "Your government has 12 hours to surrender unconditionally. If they refuse, we will demonstrate what happens when a species threatens humanity with genocide." Vextar felt his world collapsing around him. Everything the Dominion had built, everything they had conquered, was about to be destroyed by a species they had dismissed as weak and primitive. "You can't do this," he protested. "The Galactic Council will intervene. The other species will unite against you." Chen's laugh was without humor. "The Galactic Council? They've been watching this conflict very carefully, Vextar. When we offered to share our tactical recordings with them, they were quite interested to see how the mighty Dominion performed against a primitive species." The display changed again, showing messages from various alien governments. The Corvani Republic was offering to mediate a ceasefire. The Stellar Consortium was requesting formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Even the proud Altarian Empire was expressing interest in trade agreements. "It seems that conquering 50 worlds isn't as impressive when everyone can see you get destroyed by a species you thought was defenseless," Chen observed. "Your reputation for invincibility is gone, Vexitar. The galaxy now knows that the Dominion can be beaten." "What do you want?" Vexitar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Justice," Chen replied simply. "Your government will surrender unconditionally. Your military will be disbanded. Your conquered worlds will be freed to govern themselves, and you personally will stand trial for crimes against sentient species. And if we refuse?" The display changed one more time, showing a single human ship positioned near Zephyria Prime. It was larger than anything Vextar had ever seen, a massive vessel that seemed to bend space around itself. "That's the UHSF Damocles," Chen said quietly. "Our most advanced warship. It carries weapons that can crack a planet's crust or boil away its atmosphere. If your government refuses to surrender, we will use it to ensure that the Zephyrian Dominion never threatens anyone again." Vextar stared at the monstrous ship on his screen. He had spent his entire life believing that the Dominion was the strongest force in the galaxy. Now he was learning that they had been nothing but bullies picking on defenseless victims. "You have 11 hours and 57 minutes, Chen said. "Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Vextar alone with his surviving officers in the ruins of his command center. Around him, his people looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. "Sir?" Kresh asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Vextar looked at the tactical display, showing human ships surrounding his homeworld. He thought about the billions of Zephyrians on the planet below, most of whom had never even seen a human. They didn't deserve to die because their leaders had been too arrogant to recognize a superior force. "Send a message to the High Council," he said finally. "Tell them we surrender." "Sir, we surrender unconditionally," Vextar repeated, his voice heavy with defeat. The old human was right. We wanted war and they gave it to us. Now we pay the price for our arrogance. As his communications officer began transmitting the surrender, Vextar thought about Admiral Chen's words weeks ago in the detention cell. The old man had seemed so calm, so certain, even when facing what appeared to be certain defeat. Now Vextar understood why. Chen hadn't been making a desperate threat or an empty boast. He had been stating a simple fact. Humanity had the strength. To back up their words, they simply chose not to show it until someone forced them to. The Zephyrian Dominion had ruled through fear and intimidation for centuries, conquering species that couldn't fight back. But when they threatened humanity with extinction, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They had awakened a species that prepared for war by hoping for peace, but when peace failed, they waged war with an efficiency that made the Dominion look like amateur barbarians. Hours later, as Vextar watched human ships take control of Zephyrian space, he reflected on the lesson his species had learned too late. In a galaxy full of predators, the most dangerous ones were often those who looked like prey. The humans had looked weak and peaceful because they chose to appear that way. But underneath that peaceful exterior was something that had taken the greatest military force in galactic history and crushed it like an insect. The war was over. Humanity had won. And the galaxy would never look at the small, quiet species the same way again. In his final log entry as High Commander, Vextar wrote, "We laughed at the old human when he promised us war. We should have listened more carefully. He wasn't making a threat. He was making a prophecy."